One, two, three, four.
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of Lay It on the Table, the Southern Board Game Podcast. Oh, damn it. I don't know if I'm leaving that in. All right, we're going to try it again.
All right, man.
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of Lay It on the Table, the Southern Board Game Podcast with the accent on Southern. As usual, I am your host, Joe Mahaffey, and I'm always joined by my partner in crime,
James Engelhardt. Good to be here, Joe. We had one false start, but there wasn't 3 or 4, so I'm feeling like we're back on track.
I made the mistake of not having the copy right where I could see it, and I just thought, I'll be fine, and then I just blew it. So anyway, I'll decide later if I'm going to leave that in or not. We'll decide. It's always funnier when I do, at least to me.
I think it's funnier too. Yeah. So.
Well, so it's been a few weeks since we've had an opportunity to speak. We spoke with our guest last time. We don't have a guest today, so it's a good opportunity for us to sort of catch up on what's been going on in our own world of board games. And so let's just kind of get started with what's on the table. Do you want to go first?
I was going to say, what is on your table? I can go first. Sure.
Yeah, because you got a lot more than I do. So
yeah, so I'll try to move through. I think, we just the other day, last weekend, we had some big storms come through here and blew out the power. Mm-hmm. And Emerson was down for his nap. We were working, and the lights went out. The computers died. Everything was over. We said, if there was only something we could do with the lights out, oh my goodness, there's several hundred board games here. So we went to the shelf and went out to the one room that has kind of good ambient lighting. And so played Sanssouci, which I've talked about before, a classic from way back. And that's a nice little tile laying, and that was nice. And then we went to one that we hadn't played in a while that we really love.
If I can interrupt you on there, isn't there a reprint coming on Sanssouci, or is there something?
I think there is.
I've been seeing stuff in like the feeds and stuff that there might very well be something new coming out in that world, or there's either a reprint with some really nice meeple or artifacts to go with it that are really upgraded pieces, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying
that makes sense. Here. It's a fantastic little game. It's a really nice kind of lightweight, like probably a gateway level, it's a little more interesting. You get a little hand of cards. Everybody has exactly the same hand of cards. You shuffle them up so they'll come out in different patterns. And then they'll let you either pick a colored column, and the columns are all different kinds of things you would find in a garden, topiaries, fountains, statues. It's based on the Sanssouci garden, so these are very fancy garden type things. And you've got 2 little secret goal cards that are going to be different each turn or each time you play. And so you're just trying to fill in your little garden board. And there's a couple of sort of variations that are built into the box, which is nice. It gives you some things once you've sort of figured out what the base game is. But it's really simple to sit down in front of somebody and say, you have 2 cards, you play one, you put the thing on your board, and you draw another card.
Oh, neat. And
that's it. Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward, and it was nice just to have that. And we live in the Sanssouci neighborhood of Greenville, so that was an easy one to get to. Easy one to say, hey, let's play that.
Hear that, all of our Stalker fans? You now know where to find James.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah.
So then also, between Furman and Thurn, yeah. So we also played Thurn and Taxis, which is one we hadn't played in a long time. That's also a blast from the past kind of game.
Okay.
I want to say it was like a Spiel des Jahres winner years ago, but I cannot remember now. And it's kind of, when I first pitched it to Laura to play a couple of years ago, I said it's like Ticket to Ride but more.
Okay.
And she was like, okay. And it is. It's a real nice. Won a Spiel des Jahres in 2006.
Nice.
And you are drafting little cards that have names of German cities, and then when you have enough of them in a row, you play them down in front of you. There's rules for how they get played down, and then you can score them and put little meeples, and there are rules about how you can put those out. And you're trying to build. You're never blocking anybody. There's no real route building, but there's strategies for filling in different areas and getting bonuses for that, and fulfilling certain sort of contracts in a row. And it's a lot of fun. And there was another good one, since the lights are out, let's just play that.
Nice. I just think it's interesting, when we live in such a connected world, and it's nice to know that we still have options when we get disconnected from that world.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. It was super fun too. It was like, the lights went out, and about 3 seconds later, both said, "So, board games?" Yeah. It was fun. And then another old one we just got to the table last night. I finally convinced her by pitching it as the Quest for El Dorado with, again, sort of like Turn in Taxis and Ticket to Ride, the Quest for El Dorado with a little bit more. And she said it was more than a little bit more, but it was really good. So Lewis and Clark, The Expedition is a 2013, and it had a recent reboot too. So there's a second edition that came out just a handful of years ago.
Okay.
And I don't know exactly the date of that. So there's a new version floating around if you're looking up rules and stuff.
Well, no, that's really cool. I mean, I was obviously, I was a history major at
Yes.
Wofford College. And one of my favorite books is the Lewis and Clark biography by Stephen Ambrose.
Oh,
and
nice.
It's an amazing depiction of that story of leaving from really what is today Louisville, Kentucky, and making their way all the way out to the Pacific Northwest. And so I would be very intrigued to take a look at that game and just sort of see how the mechanics match up to the actual story.
Well, thank you for setting me up for that. It starts
like we rehearsed this.
I know. The game starts in St. Louis.
Okay.
And I picked it up when I was living in Nebraska, so very close to where where the expedition was going. And so it's both a deck builder and a worker placement. And you have Native American meeples that go to a sort of shared board, and they're going out and bringing materials back, and that's the worker placement part. And then you're also drafting cards. You have a basic hand of cards that starts things that have the kinds of things that you would sort of expect from this sort of game, right? Some give you resources, some help you move forward, which is what you're wanting to do. Some break the rules in one way or another. But each of the cards is individually numbered, particularly the ones the encountered cards. And they are, I want to say there's like 58 of them. And they're all unique, and they're all named after the people that the Lewis and Clark encountered and who were living in that area. So there's a whole lot of history that's in the game. Now that flavor text is is in the back of the book if you want to read it.
Sure. Yeah, no.
But
God forbid we learn something playing games.
I know, but it was super cool. Like, okay, I want that guy does. And they all sort of matched with who they were to the expedition.
Please tell me there's a grizzly bear card.
There is not. There is a Newfoundland dog card, though.
Okay.
So, but he's helpful. You're not really being set upon by bears. You're really just trying to get across all of that.
There's an iconic story in the diaries, and I'm gonna go off nerd in a different nerd way.
All right, man.
There's an iconic story in the diaries where the Native Americans tell them about the grizzly bear, and they're like, "Oh, that's just because you have these inferior weapons. We will go and find this grizzly bear."
Huh.
And I can't remember if it was Lewis or Clark, but he shot one.
And it kept coming.
And it kept coming. And remember, the firearms in those days were fire. And then there was a big process of
pause.
Yes, while you're waiting to it. And evidently, he finally was up a tree shooting down at the bear when he finally felled the bear.
Wow.
And after a few attempts at this, they decided, you know what? We're just going to leave the bears alone. We're just going to respect the bear.
It's good to pay attention to your native guides and what they tell you too.
So that was that's why I was really hoping that story has always stuck with me. That's why I was really hoping there was going to be a grizzly bear card or something like that.
That's awesome.
Cool.
No, and it's the reason I got it off the shelf was because the Board Game Geek store has these 24-hour flash sales, and they had Geek Up bits.
Oh yeah.
And the original materials that come in the box, it's these cubes or hexagonal cubes, and they have nothing on them. So the white is horses somehow. So there's, and the Geek Up bits had icons on them, so you knew what you were actually doing. So that was nice. Yeah. But then take it, you're racing to Fort Clatsop, and first person who brings their camp there wins. It's a pretty straightforward race, but how you get that race going is sort of fun. Laura had a great time. We've been talking about it a lot.
Yeah, we're we're still kind of going through our little wall of shame, and then of course certain things will present themselves and create a distraction. So it was I'm trying to think now. 2 weeks ago, it was 2 weeks ago, I was in the friendly local game store, Carolina Tabletop Games, not a sponsor.
And no longer letting teens without adults around. Yeah,
evidently, yes. I was evidently oblivious to this until yesterday. It was brought to my attention. I don't know the backstory there. I'll have to figure that out.
It seems something about kids stealing older people's beer. So that's just hilarious.
Okay. You've obviously investigated it more than I have. That now
it was on Facebook. There was a discussion.
I didn't see the Facebook. I was watching the Discord channel.
That was funny.
Yeah, that is pretty funny. One of the drawbacks, I guess. Anyway, I was in the friendly local game store protecting my beer. I knew exactly where it was at all times. And we had, instead of doing a painting day 2 weeks ago, we did a learn a new game day. And so I was teaching a bunch of people how to play Flamecraft, which was a lot of fun. Excellent. And one of my former scouts, who's now a teacher in Charlotte, runs a RPG club at his school, or tabletop role-playing club, I should say.
Right.
And he was in there with his crew, and they were playing Gartenbau.
Yeah.
And I went over to take a look at it, and I was like, oh, this is a Dale game. In other words, it's a game that Dale would love. And of course, it was Easter and coming up, and I was like, we always like to have like a spring-based theme game. And so I went ahead and picked it up, and boy, that's a fun game.
Yeah.
It is like dominoes.
Pretty looking, too.
But it is, there's some strategy to it. You're thinking, the way that it's structured, you're really thinking steps ahead to how are you going to get to the end. And it's also, very satisfying from a score perspective, because I've won and Dale has won, and our scores are balanced in the sense that there's multiple ways to run up the points. There's the sense that you have these certain tiles, at least with the base, there's like a starter set of tiles, and then there's more advanced. So we're still on the starter tiles. But there's a sense you're always going to get the starter tiles out. There's not the way that the mechanic of the game operates, there's no possible way that you couldn't.
Okay.
So the gap in your score is how well you play the bonuses that are on some of those things. And one of them is leaving holes in your garden, so a little square. And then
it looks like it's so you lay it out, it looks like kind of like a King Domino sort of setup.
Yeah.
So you've got sometimes they're the same.
But don't get caught up in the whole King Domino thing. It's a different mechanic altogether. That looks as in the sense that it's a domino type of
and you're trying not to leave gaps,
right? But you don't have to. It doesn't have to be like on like and stuff like that. So you have a lot of flexibility. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get seedlings out. Then once you get the seedlings out, you cover the seedlings with plants. And once you get the appropriate plants out, you can flower the plant.
Okay.
So it's three-dimensional in many respects. And those are your points are those tiles that you get on top. It's a very accessible game. I honestly think it would it's a gateway game. It's kind of got that appeal of, It's competitive, but it's not mean. It's enjoyable in the sense that it takes about an hour-ish to play with 2 people. We'd love to play it with 4 just to see what that's like.
Oh yeah.
And it's just really fun game. So we've been playing that. Obviously Easter was in there, so this was kind of like the only game we got out. We had a lot of stuff going on.
Fair.
So, but today I think we're talking about getting out Don't Forget the Kittens, which is the sequel to, or the add-on to Isle of Cats, and so we'll see what
right, okay,
how that plays. That's on our shelf of shame. We've had it for a while, and we kind of put it away so that we could give it to the extra copy to our daughter for Christmas, and so we haven't really had a chance to pull that out. And I'll talk in a little bit what I'm hoping will show up today. Okay. The other game that I played since we were last together is as you know, we have a new player in our D&D group, Doug.
Yes.
And midweek, he invited me to come to his house to meet some other folks and play Hero Quest.
And there's a throwback.
The 2021 reprint that was put together by Hasbro Labs. And, I was like, oh, do I really, at first I was like, yeah, that sounds good. But I was like making sure Dale was like, well, I have plans Friday night, or something like that. But nope, she was good with it. So there was no reason not to go. And I got to tell you, the first thing I know, first of all, I'll tell you this. It's the first time I thought I looked at it and go, oh, we're going to meet at the game store. And then I realized, nope, he's inviting us to his house. And it gave me pause.
Okay.
Only because it's, with the pandemic and everything, it's been really such a long time since people said, yeah, come to the house.
Fair enough,
I just was struck by the fact that I paused. I didn't hesitate. It was just sort of like, that kind of thing. But man, this was a blast. It was,
good.
This was, 5 guys, sitting in a room, on a dining room table. We had the game out. The guy who had backed it was like Hasbro Labs, which is their version of Kickstarter, I guess.
Okay.
He had the full set.
Nice to have your own version of Kickstarter.
Evidently. Yeah. We'll work on that project for the future. So he had all the bits and everything. And it was like a straight 2 hours. It was like a 2 hour one shot.
That's what I was going to ask. Okay. 2 hours isn't too bad.
Yeah. And then we did like what they call campaign 0. So it was probably the easiest, but, the mechanic was simple. Once we kind of got the rules and, everything down, it flowed pretty well. And we all kind of jumped into our characters, pretty well. By the way, my character, you're going to love this because this will come up later in topic. I was a half elf rogue.
Yes.
And I had a bandolier and, throwing daggers. It was great.
That sounds good.
I was the only one that could do a real decent ranged effect on the baddies.
With throwing daggers?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was, these were like, level 0.
Right.
What I'm saying.
Right.
No, but it was fun. It was fun. We,
and it has that throwback art on it that looks like.
Yeah. They did a nice job with it. I've seen it retail in the store. I think the only difference between the retail version and the Hasbro Lab Mythic Edition is you get more minis in the Mythic Edition, and there's 1 or 2 extra stories, quests. One of them written by Joe Manganiello, which we'll talk a little bit about him a little bit later. Okay. That was included in the pack. That is not part of the retail version. In the retail versions, you get the main base game, and then there's other upgrades you can buy. But it was fun time. I'm glad that I have a friend that has it, so I can say, hey, let's get together and play again. I don't have to buy it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it's great to have these sort of classic games that I still haven't touched because that goes way back.
Yeah.
It's fun that they've got the new version. Yeah.
1989 is when it rolled out, so you would have been in college.
I would have.
So, yeah, but it was fun, and we got done, and it was like, wow, that was pretty cool.
Excellent.
So,
sort of similarly. I was going to say Laura and I also played Cascadia a little while ago, but Colony was one from a couple of years ago again as well, and it was one where Laura was like, "No, That was nice. 2016. So yeah, 6 years ago. And it's you're using dice as resources in this post-apocalyptic setting, but you never felt like it was so like a one is food and a two is cloth and a three is, and you're never thinking, okay, I need 3 cloth and 1 oil. It's just like I need 3 threes and a 6, right? So yeah. And you're just manipulating dice to fulfill goals. And it was pretty light. I liked it just fine. That seemed like a fun thing to do with dice and cards, but Laura was like, even though I like post-apocalypse. Yeah. So, but it was fun. Speaking of things that you like to get off the table or like to get off the shelf and at least try it a couple times.
Well, it's funny too. It's funny you mentioned it that way. I can't think of a game that we have on the shelf that we don't like, and so from some variant, I think if anything kind of gets the bum's rush is probably the Villainous, just because it's when it's 2-player, I don't know, it's just not as satisfying as when you have multi. We did once at the game store. I think we had every single set distributed, and we were it was a big group, and it was just crazy. But it was fun. It was fun because we kind of got to see how people played the characters and stuff like that. So that was kind of neat.
Yep. Yeah, and I think part of it is like I really enjoyed it, Lord in particularly. But I think like speaking of Villainous, I think 3 or 4 people at least is what you want for that. So.
And that's one of the challenges. I mean, I love finding games that work well 2-player. But they're also, we play a lot of games that the rules are a little different for 2-player.
Yes.
And so when you play it with more people, you're almost like learning the game over again, or aspects of it. And that's okay. But that is one of the drawbacks. And so we've been talking about needing to get out to the game store more often. We used to do it on a pretty regular basis during the week and weekend and stuff like that. So I'm hoping that we can kind of reposition our lives to get back into that kind of mode. It helps when there's food trucks uptown.
That does help.
So yeah, that's what's been sort of on our table. We're hoping, like I said, to get Don't Forget the Kittens out today, but we'll see kind of where the mood strikes. We still have a few other things on the shelf of shame. I don't know if I mentioned to you that my copy of Distilled showed up. I think last time we spoke, it had shipped.
Right.
So I talked about it then. I haven't even taken it out of the plastic yet, but it did come with a really cool shot glass and coasters. So I'm set up for at least one aspect. Anyway. So, and speaking of, things that have popped up we haven't talked about Kickstarter in a while because I was kind of quiet on what I was backing. I've only really backed a couple of things since we last spoke. I finally backed Let's Go to Japan.
I see this. Okay.
I wasn't really going to do it. I just kind of said, nope, I'm just going to let it go. Did too much on Kickstarter, need a 12-step program for that. So let's just kind of let it go. And then a buddy of mine pinged me, hey, are you backing this? So I started looking at it a little bit more. And it wasn't that bad of a jump in. Sometimes there are these ridiculous backing levels.
Yes.
Whereas this one was either like, hey, there's a standard edition, there's a deluxe edition. We're going to give you the choice, and you're going to get a little bit of a discount over it if you bought it in the store. And oh, by the way, we're going to give you all this stretch goals and social goals. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. That's okay. Because I've seen one. I think there was one I mentioned a while back that all it really was you got the game ahead of everybody else. There was nothing special about it, which is fine. But I was kind of like, if the only perk is getting it early, I'd rather go buy it from the local game store and give the owner the profit. That was the sort of the rub, if you will.
Yeah. No, you really do. If you're going for Kickstarter, you do expect either some stretch goals or a discount or something that kind of sweetens the deal.
Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So I backed that, and then I, as you know, I've been doing a lot of 3D printing.
Yes.
And
this looks really fascinating. Yeah, I want to hear more about this one.
Well, it was just one of these things where you can 3D print and sort of mix and match your printing station. And I think that as I do, not printing station, I'm sorry, I misspoke, painting station.
I was going to say, it looks cool here.
And it's really, it's very much inspired by Legos in the sense that you print what you need and then you put it together so that you can either have a drawer or you can have a place for your brushes, a place for your materials. And I think it's really great for a crafty type studio. And although I have some things I have a Milwaukee pack out over here to my right that you don't see on camera that I keep all my paints in. I'm just looking for ways to continually, better organize when I'm not only storing it, but also when I go places. Because I typically paint more at the game store than I do at home.
Okay.
And I'm trying to do more painting at home because I find it very therapeutic. But I think part of the thing I find therapeutic about painting minis is being in the store with people talking while we're painting. And so yesterday,
so it's a social thing, not just I'm all by myself. Yeah, okay.
It's like painting. It's like playing a game, but you're painting instead. And one of our friend of the show, Christina Stiles, had a former student of hers from Winthrop come in yesterday, and he was teaching us classical blending techniques that allowed you to focus where the light and the eye should go. So instead of just doing a straight speed paint, it was like we began to layer everything. And so I was at one point, that's one of the reasons I was so frustrated at one point, because I was not happy with the way it was going. And, here's this young fella. He's been doing painting only since the beginning of the pandemic. And, but he was very, I thought very patient with somebody who was getting very frustrated.
That's good. That's good.
And he was encouraging, like, that's good. This could be different. And if you do this, you might be able to get it back on track. As opposed to, I'm really tired of this guy whining because Griffin doesn't look right. And you saw the pictures that I posted on Facebook, and I can put them in the show notes too if people are interested. But it was just really a fun time to learn the art technique, because he was like, this is how the classical painters think about light.
That's so cool.
And so that was just kind of neat, because I like going, that's one of the benefits of going to the store is that we usually get somebody to come in and do sort of a tutorial. And when I started doing this, the person had done like the slap chop quick. How do you do an army for Warhammer really fast? That kind of technique. And that's a great technique. And that's kind of my base go-to technique. So I think part of the challenge here was it went against my comfort zone. Because usually we spray paint the minis black, and then we build up with the slap chop and then build your color on it. This, we left the white grayish primer that WizKids puts on their minis, and began to kind of go in reverse order, if that makes sense. It's like difference between RGB versus cyan, yellow, magenta, black, if you know anything about color science. See, I can nerd out on any topic.
There you go.
So anyway, so that's sort of more than I wanted to talk about here, because we're talking about Kickstarter, but that's one of the reasons why this appealed to me, because I'm finding that although the majority of my paints are Army Painter paints, because I find them to be economical, I find them to be of high quality. They're not a sponsor. And easier for me to deal with.
It's a popular brand,
than Citadel. But although I do have a few Citadels as well. So I'm just thinking that this would be a good way to kind of 3D print out my stuff. And then, of course, there's no restrictions. I can print them out and share with people.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And I love the sort of modular nature of it, too.
Yeah. Because, I mean, obviously, although it looks like I have this massive space here, it's really a space that is a place for everything and everything in its place kind of space. So there's not a lot of extra, room around. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm excited about those two things. Nothing in the intriguing section for me with Kickstarter. I don't know if you've seen anything intriguing.
No, it's been we're in the last couple of weeks of the semester. The last day of class is 9 days from now. So it's been it's been a little more sprint to the end here. So,
got it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I am excited about a couple of things. I did get the notification on Friday that Darwin's Journey had finally shipped, and I gotta remember. I want to say that I have been waiting for this darn thing. I'm going to pull up my backed projects on Kickstarter because this was one of the very first ones I backed, I think. And
no, it's been out there for a while, yeah.
Let's see here. And the reason we backed it is because it was done by the same designers that did Ten Garden, and we're very excited about that. Okay, yeah. So Darwin's Journey was originally supposed to be delivered in November 2021.
Ooh, that was a tough time to start. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, no. Look, they've been great.
Yeah.
You know, there, as we've discussed in the past, there have been others that have not been so great.
Mm-hmm.
But no, this has been around for a while. It's been around for a hot minute, but we're very excited about it finally showing up. In fact, it may very well show up on my front stoop while we're doing this recording.
Right. That's the one. Okay. I was waiting for that shoe to drop, and that shoe to drop is Darwin's shoe.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So if that shows up today, the kittens may not make it to the table.
Aw,
I know.
Poor kitten.
It's, we might forget them today, is kind of my point. And then the other thing that I just quickly threw in the show notes because I completely forgot about it. I had ordered this months ago from the game store. I saw a video on it. Looked really interesting. Haven't pulled it out of the box yet. But Rebuilding Seattle is now in the collection. And it's, it's a game about the recovery of Seattle after the 1889 fire that burned down most of downtown Seattle. And so you're kind of operating and rebuilding neighborhoods and stuff like that. So it kind of looked like an interesting game. And I like it when I order certain things from the store that they hadn't heard of, and they always order 2 copies, one for me and one to put on the shelf. So
that's awesome.
Well, it's only awesome if it sells.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Because I did that with Genotype as well, and I got really nervous because I kept seeing Genotype on the shelf, and I finally said, "Does that sell?" He's like, "Yeah, I keep reordering." I'm like,
"Oh, that's good. That's good. That's a much happier end to that story."
Exactly. So I hope that
I was worried there for you, man.
I hope there's something like that here at Rebuilding Seattle.
Yeah.
So that's all I have in the
heard a little bit about that, but I haven't. And is this more like is this a tile placement kind of action that you're going through here?
There is there's some tiles, there's some little square markers you're keeping. A lot of the things that you're keeping track of look a lot like Tapestry, the way you do that a little bit, or even more like if you've ever seen Weather Machine.
I have not.
That's a Vita Lacerda game. There's a lot of that kind of movement of certain things because you're trying to. I mean, obviously you're rebuilding a city, so think about the things you have to keep. If you remember the old Sim City game, the video game.
Yeah, never played it. Alas, yeah, no, nope. I used to. I live an analog life. Apparently,
I understand. Well, I used to use it as brain candy on a plane. It's really kind of hard to pull out a board game on a plane and say, "Hey, everybody,
let's do this." Yeah.
So it reminds me a little bit of that, but obviously it's still in the shrink wrap. Like I said, I was doom scrolling on YouTube one night, and I found a guy reviewing the game, and I started looking through the review, and I was like, wow, this is a nice looking game. This is kind of something that would fit our aesthetic. I just didn't know, and it took like 3 months to get. So I don't know if they kickstarted it or what. I never saw a Kickstarter on it, but I just I ordered it through the store, and he said, "Yep, we can get it, but it'll be March." And I'm like, "Okay."
I gotta say, man, the art design is pretty functional.
Yeah.
Huh. So, but it's still interesting. Wow, cool. All right. Well, yeah, I'm very curious to see how that goes.
And ironically, it's published by WizKids.
That's funny.
Well, it's. I mean, I know they publish games. It just seemed to me this was a game that I didn't expect to come from them, and maybe that's a bias that I have because I get their minis and stuff. But like I said, it seems like a really cool game. Probably wasn't kickstarted. It probably was just sort of done.
It's. I like the little polyominoes. It looks Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so it's a 60, 120 minutes, weight right in the middle of the weight range. Okay.
Yeah.
No, it looks intriguing.
So I will let you know how it goes once we get it on the table.
Once you lay it on the table there?
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah.
So moving on to speaking of wizards on the coast and tabletop role-playing games. Since we were last together, Dungeons and Dragons did their D&D Direct at the end of March. And that was around the time they also invited all the influencers out to Seattle to wine and dine them and say, please don't hate us anymore.
Yes.
And it was funny because I think we talked a little bit about that event when we had Megan on a couple of weeks ago. And I was saying that Professor Dungeon Master did not get invited, yet he did do a video about it. Or no, he did a video about, actually, no, I correct myself. He did a video on the D&D Direct piece. But there were a couple of things that came out of it that I thought were interesting, and I'll kind of jump on the things first that I think are interesting because I think there's more controversial things that we might talk about. I could, number one, care less about their association with Minecraft and D&D. I don't really think that's interesting to me, but I'm not a Minecrafter. No. I know a lot of people that are out there that love Minecraft, and I will say unequivocally, Minecraft is a great platform to get young people into coding. And
that makes sense.
It's from a STEM, priming the pump with STEM and your young person's life. Great thing. Absolutely. And so I'm sure there's an audience for it. I'm just not the audience.
Well, and I'm thinking Sky, who's in middle school, and all of her buddies were huge into Minecraft for a while, and they're still older kids who are into it. But it's going to be, I think it's a fill the pipeline kind of move too, right? So if we can get sixth graders who are starting to get interested in, what's something that's a little more challenging? Ooh, here's D&D. I've heard about that, right? And get them in, as I said, get them into the pipeline, get them interested, get them thinking, oh yeah, here's this thing I love to do, and I can do this other thing too. And there's this movie that's out, right?
Right.
Yep.
Well, and they also announced all the books that are going to come out this year. Big B presents The Glory of the Giants and Fandelver and Below the Shattered Obelisk. And there's this theory about all these obelisks that have been in the books. That this is kind of like there has been some suggestion that this is sort of like a Avengers Endgame kind of thing with the obelisks and the stories that's going to tie a lot of these books together in a lot of different ways. And then, of course, there's Planescape Adventures in the Multiverse, which if you remember in the original world of TSR and all that, there was a Planescape book. And then finally, the one that I think is really interesting is the Deck of Many Things, because I think that's just a fun mechanic that you can find in the game.
Yeah.
I was also pretty interested in the Joe Manganiello D&D documentary.
Yeah.
I think, the thing I like about Joe is that he is such a super fan of the game, not just like I showed up late and I'm being paid to be a spokesperson. It's like, no, I played this as a kid, and he made this game so accessible to so many different people because he was not, because of the way he went into it, he was more of a, he wasn't the stereotype that we generally associate with the game, I guess is a nice way to say it. I don't know.
Yeah, that'll work.
And I don't know if
I feel you there, but yeah. So yeah,
but I just think that's great because I remember when he was on the first campaign for Critical Role. The guy's name is escaping me. They called themselves Jocks Machina because they were like the more of the jock side of the table, which I thought was kind of funny.
That is nice.
That name is going to come to me, and I'm going to Travis Willingham. That's who it was. Travis Willingham. I don't know why. I don't know why, because he's married to Laura Bailey, and and they have obviously they've keep their professional names, and I think that always throws me off.
Okay.
Plus, I didn't expect to talk about that, so I had to think about it. Anyway, so I'm excited about the documentary, and I've also heard rumors, and I haven't confirmed this, so I'm just going to leave this in the rumor mill.
All right.
That Joe could be working with Paramount on a Dragonlance TV series.
Interesting.
So a lot of that will depend upon the movie. The movie got a 93% Rotten Tomatoes score, which is fantastic.
That's amazing, yeah.
And everybody that I've heard that has seen the movie thinks it's great. In fact, one person said, I laughed out loud. No, I've heard good things about it. Unfortunately, I won't see it until it goes to streaming because I just don't go to theaters. Yeah. But
yeah, I have the same. Well, toddler makes things tricky. The thing that I have, the statement that I liked best was someone, I think it might have been the same person, in fact, who said, when I saw the movie, it wasn't as if the trailer was the movie, right? So there's more stuff. Yes. The trailer is just a trailer. It's not the film itself. So I've been to many movies, particularly adventure ones, where you're like, oh, well, that was everything. So I guess, well, damn. Oh, well, yeah.
Well, and considering it went up against John Wick 4 when it came out, and it did as well as it did closer to the 40 million mark than the 30 million mark, which I think was an arbiter of it. Then the next week, Mario came out. So that's going to stunt everybody's growth. But I think for all intents and purposes, it should make its money back. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it will prime itself for a sequel, but it may very well prime itself for the TV show.
And this is, and we're talking about numbers just in theaters. When it gets to streaming, then we'll see what happens.
Fair.
Then.
And honestly, I meant to look at it today just to see where Variety says that they are, but the global audience too will be interesting because I don't know.
Yeah.
We sort of talked about this previously months ago when we were talking about the OGL and different markets and stuff. I have a sense of how D&D plays in the States and Canada and the UK. I would say Europe as well.
Australia probably add to that.
Yeah, that's fair.
The English-speaking world, it's an English kind of, yeah.
Australia, New Zealand, and now that I remember it, a few years back there was a family in the community that had a foreign exchange student, and the foreign exchange student came to the game store looking for a D&D group.
Wow.
And I was like, and they were like from a non-English speaking country. And I was like, okay. So that kind of gives you a sense, but I just don't know how the film will translate globally. Obviously the big market after the United States is China.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
A lot of stuff.
Yep. We'll see. So, but obviously there were some, more controversial, are they controversial kind of things that came out of the whole thing? And obviously I alluded to it earlier today saying that I was playing a rogue half elf, and I have a friend who plays a half elf.
I myself play a half elf sorcerer. Yeah, I know. With ties to the Feywild. Yeah, it's all, so yeah. And there was this question, I guess, that this idea that, Wizards is getting rid of the half races, particularly half elves, half orcs, the sort of human mixes. And they said, yeah, because these are inherently racist. And I thought, well, yeah, of course they are. That makes sense. Hadn't thought about it yet, but yes, of course. And a whole lot of fanboys lost their minds about it. And it occurred to me that I didn't know why. It didn't make sense to me. I'm like, well, yeah, because as soon as you say half anything and if you change that from half orc, half elf and change it to half black, half Mexican, you go, oh yeah, of course, we're dealing with Jim Crow and slavery and everything else. And I think, oh, right. I see what that is. If you're a, middle class white dude, happy sitting in your living room playing D&D with your other white buddies, it's probably not a problem. But I could see how it could be a bit of a barrier to interest to people of color who might think, you know what, they just haven't thought this through. I thought this is a good move. Makes sense to me.
So I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with any of it. I think what's the thing I struggle with is then just keep the characters, change the way you talk about them, because there are a lot of more mixed race people in our world than probably ever at any other time in human history, and I think it will only continue to happen as travel gets easier and people move around and they fall in love with who they fall in love with. It's a shame they can't find another way to leave the positives of that in the game and just change the terminology to make it less offensive.
Well, so here's a couple of different things. One is that race works differently in D&D than it does in reality.
Understood.
Right? Yeah. So what we think of as race in the real world is a construct and isn't based in any sort of biology whatsoever. So that's the first problem, right? Because because now what you're talking about, if you're talking about D&D world, is dwarves. They're not just a race, they're a species.
Right.
And so are
100%.
elves, right? And so it becomes a very different sort of discussion. Of course, all of this is in a magical world,
Absolutely.
which isn't real. So any of this stuff can happen. But you can just, by doing that sort of half thing, you evoke this history. And so, yeah, it'd be great to live past the implications of that. But right now we're not. And you pull all of that into this fantasy world because we don't live... because D&D doesn't actually exist in that fantasy world. It actually exists in Omaha and Greenville and Tallahassee.
No, 100%. And I just think that because there's so much gameplay that happens the way that those certain attributes are positioned around certain species and classes and stuff like that. I think if it was just a way to leave how do you leave the mechanic that makes the game interesting, but change the terminology to make it more inclusive, I think it'd be the something to think about as opposed to just saying, well, let's just strike it out altogether. I don't know. It'll remain to be seen, I think, as to how it really impacts the game. Because obviously they weren't always there.
Yeah, and Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, there was a whole section that kind of started rolling back the whole matching up particular races / species with certain bonuses or negatives. And so that opens up a whole lot of, being able to make some different choices. And, one of the fun things about doing the sort of half elf character is, he's of two worlds. His dad abandoned his mom and now he has to go and find this, and I get that. I understand that it's a nice narrative hook. So I'm sensitive. Am I also sensitive again to the critique that, this is a fantasy world. We can have magical whatever. But I just thought it was funny when the half race thing came up and people were like, how could this possibly be racist? And I thought, man,
well,
for 500 years, it's been a problem. All right. And longer.
I think it's just to your point. It's just, I think everybody's looking for something to be mad about. Although somebody made a really great point. Really what they should do is eliminate the bard character completely.
Oh, yeah.
Because the bard character is the reason why they had all these mixed species.
Oh, 100%. That's the
that
thing.
was the thing I saw. I thought that was pretty funny.
I like that a lot. Yeah.
Anyway, so
I'm going to distract the guard. The guard's a tiefling. All right. Hey.
Oh, geez. Yeah. So I think that, from that particular standpoint, it'll be interesting to see how it rolls out. My sense is that the official game will probably stay the way it is, and then people will play their homebrews the way they play their homebrews.
Well, and that's the other thing that I see a lot too, right? It's like, so WotC says, this is what the rules are. And you're like, well, that's great. You're not showing up in my, on my Zoom calls telling me how to play this game.
Right,
so
right. 100%. And, but hopefully people will be mindful of it.
Well, and what's nice, yeah, exactly. Well, no, what's nice is for them to take these anti-racist stances, and you can go and again do whatever homebrew you like. But it's nice to have the major group saying, "Yeah, we're going to, work against that as much as we can." So I appreciated that about that.
So it kind of makes me wonder because I told you on Hero Quest I was playing a rogue half elf, and Hero Quest actually put out the special module where you buy that separate. It's like $17.
Oh,
so it obviously came with the mythic tier, but I'm curious if they'll roll that. I wonder if Hasbro, which owns Hero Quest, is Hasbro, and it was originally published by Milton Bradley back in 1989. So Hasbro does that. Wizards of the Coast is doing this. I would be curious to see if it populates across the entire line of toys and games that they publish.
Yeah. And spoken like a true IT guy, that was nice. It populates across.
Occasionally I get one right,
Yeah, no, that was good.
So
no, but that is a good question. Yeah, I guess we'll just have to see.
So
one of the things that's been funny, like picking up, going to Target and finding all of these D&D toys. I'm like, yeah, there you go, Hasbro. That's what you were looking for. Yep.
Yeah, and of course they brought back the cartoon characters as little images or figurines, and evidently they're playing to two sides. They're playing to the older, you and me guy collectible market, as well as to the kids. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes into play. I know that they talked a little bit about 1D&D and their whole online platform. I don't think they went real deep in the weeds on it. I still think they're focused on 2024 for a release. I do know that they're, speaking of IT, they're using the Unreal Engine as sort of their backbone of it, but I don't know kind of where they are in the process. I've seen a number of Kickstarters coming out lately of competing systems. I saw one today.
Interesting.
Yeah. But we'll just sort of have to see how that evolves. Like I said, I don't really – that aspect of the game doesn't intrigue me as much as the way we play it. And so we'll have to wait and see how that comes about.
And it's interesting because we talked about – we were talking about the OGL a couple of months ago too, that one of the things that WotC D&D kind of does is it goes through these crises and then inspires competitors to really step up. And they're like, well, are we signing? Yeah, what are we doing? And hopefully what you really, really hope is that inspires then D&D to really step up and try not to screw it up again. But
it's interesting.
We shall see.
I was in a group yesterday, and one of the guys in the group was supposed to play with a party yesterday. And he didn't want to do another 5e game because he'd been doing it over and over again. And everybody else was like, the Matt Mercer effect. Well, no, we want to play D&D 5e. And he wanted to do something, I forget exactly what it was, but it was a completely different system. And they were also kind of talking about Pathfinder 2e versus the original. And it was just kind of interesting that despite all the kerfuffle and noise, this is my takeaway of this conversation. Mm-hmm. Despite all the kerfuffle and noise at the beginning of the year, I think Dungeons and Dragons will remain as the Kleenex FedEx of this genre, and that it will be fine.
Yep.
And
they're certainly working very hard for that to be true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that is going to be one of the outcomes. And I think, as they kind of continue, there was always going to be something that Wizards of the Coast is going to publish that is going to make an aspect of their fan base go nuts.
Yep.
And it's not just unique to D&D. It's also unique to their Magic, the Gathering, and still a game I don't play, game that I could care less about. It is all over my FGLS or FLGS. I always get that wrong.
That's fine. No, and both the new decks, the tournaments, the local games, the secondary market where it kind of goes through the FLGS buys the cards and then sells them for a mark. Yeah, no, everyone seems to have. It's a nice little engine for them, as it were.
Yep. and it's working. I mean, the store is doing great.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited by that. You know, I obviously, my friend owns a store. I want to see him be successful.
Sure.
But the other thing I would say is that yesterday while I was in there, and I was in there for about 4 hours, there was a group playing Magic.
Oh, yeah.
There was a group playing board games. We were painting. And there was a lot of Warhammer going on in the back. So I like a store. I like a store that has got that kind of diversity. And there was even a couple of folks that came in and rented one of the things you can do is spend $5 and just go sit down at a table and take a game off the shelf that they have in the back that's already opened.
Right.
And these two folks picked out Tang Garden, which is one of my favorites. Same people that published Darwin's Journey that we've been waiting on. And they had a great time. And of course, the $5 gets you a coupon that if you buy anything in the store, it's $5 off. So you're really just kind of trying it before you buy it kind of thing.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool. So watch that happen yesterday. So lots of stuff going on in the space, which was nice, even though that Magic has been fueling a lot of their growth this year. It was still nice to see, you know. Now, you go in there on certain nights of the week.
All Magic all the time.
All Magic all the time. That's exactly right. So, which is fine. Yeah. Totally fine. So, I know we're kind of coming up on the hour here. We got a few more things to kind of chit-chat about. I just want to talk briefly about some 3D tabletop printing that I've been doing.
Yeah, man.
Largely, I found on printables.com, which is a website that is put out by another 3D printer manufacturer that I don't own. I own the Anycubic series. But they have some really nice prints that people, it's a crowd share kind of website. And so I have gone through and found all of the game inserts that you can 3D print, and I've put them in a collection.
Nice.
And even if I already have an insert for the game, I went ahead and tagged it and put it there. And so I printed out an insert for Betrayal at House on the Hill 3rd edition, which it took a while for somebody to actually design that because there's a lot of nuance to that game versus 2nd edition as it relates to the size and the bits and where they go, etc. So that was great. And then I talked about Gartenbau at the beginning of this. That somebody had done a insert for the Gartenbau series. Now, what I didn't tell you is that Gartenbau comes with cardboard bits for your dominoes.
Okay.
And then you can buy an add-on that turns all that into wood.
That's cool.
So that's what we did. That's why if you saw the original picture that I posted, there's 2 boxes.
All right.
So I haven't even punched out the cardboard. So I put all the wooden pieces in the pieces that I printed, and then I also was able to print out the wheelbarrows and get it all to fit in the box. And I've just basically okay, I can put it in either box. And then one of the gentleman I mentioned earlier, who was one of my former scouts that was in the store, that was playing the game, I printed a copy for him. A set for him so that
nice.
He could do the same thing because he was the one that kind of turned me onto the game. So
you had shown me a picture of the Betrayal House on the Hill organizer, and it kind of looks like the house from the cover, which was pretty slick. I don't know if that was just because that's how the bits
it's funny
fell out, or just looks fun.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think the person who designed it, what they did is they gave you. So I have the Anycubic Cobra Plus, which is a 300 millimeter by 300 millimeter plate to print on. And it's 350 millimeters tall in terms of what you can build. So that's 300 millimeters.
That's the cube. Yeah.
300 millimeters is it's a 12 by 12. It's a foot by a foot by a little over a foot is what your space is. For those of you who, like me, grew up in the 70s under Jimmy Carter and now know nothing about metric systems or the American system. Thank you, Mr. Carter. Habitat for math. Anyway, so I was able to, the way he designed it, or they designed it, I don't know. was that you would just print it all on one sheet. So it took up your whole 300 by 300 area. And they have what is known as an apron between each print. And so when you get it, what you saw there, you actually break it apart.
Okay.
And the way that it fits in the box fits in a very particular way.
All right.
And it's actually, you have to have a really good calibrated printer because these one set of bits, if you can't get the top on them, they could go all over the insert of the game. So it did a nice job printing out. I was very pleased with that. And then the printables for the Gartenbau, same thing. I printed them in different colors. So I did 3 in a light green, 3 in a dark green, and then I mix and match some of the other things so that you can kind of give it some interesting character on the board. I did the wheelbarrow in brown. My wife wants me to redo them in red because she thinks the red wheelbarrow is more poetic. I don't know.
Yeah. So much depends upon that thing.
And the wheelbarrow came, interestingly, with a 75 millimeter version and an 85 millimeter version. And then each version also has the ability to be one wheelbarrow with a divider. So you can put the bits. And you're thinking about, if I do it in red, I will probably do 2 with a divider, and that way each person, when you're playing a 2-player game, you can kind of divide up the bits that you might need for currency and stuff, and just kind of keep them close to you.
That's cool.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
I like it.
So that was kind of fun, and I'm really enjoying kind of digging into seeing what other inserts are there, and then going back and talking about HeroQuest. The gentleman who brought it had some inserts for that, and I was like, "Oh, where did you find those?" He goes, "Oh, I did it." Wow, so I'm looking more into some of the websites and the software that allow you to design your own. I think it would be kind of fun to get a game that needs an insert and then just figure out yourself what would it take to make this happen. So that might be something I talk about in the future. I don't know.
Sure. No, that'd be cool.
So you mentioned that it's coming up on the end of the semester. Does that mean that your students are getting to do some gameplay?
They have. So they finished their second big paper, which was, tedious for them. And I got to grade them all, which was also tedious, but I think they made some good progress. So that's nice. And so, of course, at the end of each project, we have a little game day. And a couple of these games were very familiar. We played the cards, making things up to 100, down to 100. Just One, which is a sort of contemporary classic party game of, there's one clue that the clue guesser doesn't know. Everybody else writes down one word, just one. They show it to each other. If any of them match, they go away. And then the clue guesser turns around and they get one guess of what the actual word is. It's a super fun game. If you haven't played it, it's all over the place. Great. I also gave them somebody had mentioned playing some sort of classic abstract with their parents. And I said, well, here, have you ever played Ingenious? They were talking about playing Blockus. So I brought Ingenious, and they played it initially a little bit wrong. So I think that took some of the joy out of it, but my favorite from all of this was I brought a copy of Hey, That's My Fish.
Okay.
And Hey, That's My Fish has been around since I want to say the late 90s, maybe early 2000s. And it's still around. You can still pick it up. And it's this, you've got these little hexagonal tiles with different numbers of fish on them, 1 to 3. You're supposed to turn them over and then turn them, smush them around and then turn them back over in basically a rectangular shape. And then you put your little adorable penguin meeples out there on the one labeled fish. And on your turn, you just move along a straight line, however far you want to go, and then pick up the tile that you just left. So the board is shrinking constantly. And at the end, when nobody can move anymore, the number of fish you have on those tiles, that's your final score.
Oh.
So they got into this and they were like, oh, this is a kid's game. This looks great. I said, yeah, it's easy to do. So they got about 4 turns into it and were like, oh, this is mean. It's like, yes. So that group for the next hour played, I want to say 5 or 6 games of Hey, That's My Fish. They were like, nope, we're done. This is what we're doing. And so they were trying out different strategies and doing different. Yeah, it was super fun to watch them go from, oh, well, here's a quick kids game. And then before we do something else, never looked back.
The whole time I've been thinking about Bobby Hill going, hey, that's my purse. I don't know you.
Yep. Hey, that's my fish. Yeah. So, yeah, it's a super great, light little game. Again, you can still pick it up all over the place. It's kind of an evergreen title. Yeah. And it was just fun to watch them lose their minds over it.
No, that's great. That's great. So I'm glad that they got to play some games. And will there be another opportunity to play games between now and exams?
Oh, well, that's the so
asking for a friend.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, because the last day of classes was like 9 days or so, and after that there's a reading day and then exams, right? And so what has happened in the past is that everybody wants to leave by the end of the school year, right?
Right.
So there's this kind of exam creep thing where the professors are finally like, you know what? It's a Tuesday, Thursday class. It's long enough to take the final. Why don't you just show up here? We'll do the final on the last day and then no exam. So Furman has this. We really want you to have an exam experience, if not an exam itself. So for our exam experience, it's going to be 2.5 hours of board games. And I'll bring coffee and bagels, and we'll sit in the English department lounge and have 3 tables going. It'll be fun.
I think you should do like a big like one-shot campaign where to pass the class, they have to defeat the boss.
Oh yeah, that's right.
See, that
okay, you're all, there's 12 of you, second level, it'll be great. Here's Strahd. Go.
Yeah. That'll work. That's funny.
Just one final boss fight. Yeah. But no, and then what's also fun for me is thinking, now what games do I put in that bag that I'm bringing? I'll definitely bring, hey, that's my fish back and just one, but what else?
Yeah, so, no, that's
a fun challenge.
If you don't have Betrayal at House on the Hill, that's a good one.
I have Betrayal at Baldur's Gate.
Okay. Well, that's a good one too.
Yes.
You at least get 5 people off on their own, and there's enough variation in the book to kind of make it interesting.
Let the haunting begin.
Yes. So cool. Well, that's all I have this week for Lay It on the Table. Anything else from you, James?
That's all I've got too.
All right. Well, then thank you for listening to our episode today. We ask you to please follow us at layitontheTable.show. And from there, you can head on over to Apple Podcast or your favorite podcast and leave us a 5 stars and a review would be nice. But if you want to leave a snarky comment or talk about a game that we may have left out or give your opinion on something that we said or didn't say, please feel free to do that as well. You can also find us at Board Game Geek in 2 places. We have a guild. You'll find us at Guildview 4084, which of course is Lay It on the Table. And of course, you can find a link to the podcast from there as well. And then finally, you can follow us on YouTube at the Geek and Southern YouTube channel. And I will put all links to all of those connections in the show notes below. As usual, I am Joe Mahaffey. I am not bored. I am board gaming.
And I'm James Englehart, hoping that all your tiebreakers break your way.
See you next time.
1, 2, 3, 4.